So there's the setup. 5 liner for the tight areas and for lines, of course. The 11 bug pin and a 9 mag for my tight areas where I need to do some shading. My 15 mag with the 17 bug pin for my, solid black fill. And I can also shade with this too, but I use it mostly. I found 15s are really, sufficient for filling in the area black without giving the skin too much trauma. And a 25 mag for our soft grays and our white areas. So now we're going to set up our inks. I got some vitamin A and D ointment. I always use that when I tattoo. So I got 2 packs for this one. Go ahead and put that there. So this is going to be a black and gray tattoo today. So I'm going to use 4 caps. I got a black, dark, medium, and light wash. And this cap right here is going to be for the white later. I set up my palette to go from darkest to lightest, left to right. So there's our dark. Our black, our solid black, excuse me. Here's our dark wash. I make my own washes. A lot of people buy, pre-made washes. I've used them. They're great. I've just found that with my style, I tattoo, a lot of really high contrast, a lot of darks, a lot of lights, and so I keep my washes a little dark. And it's pretty much black with witch hazel, and I just got my own method as far as how many drops and how much witch hazel or water I add to it, and go from there. So that is pretty much basically it for today. We got our solid black, we got our dark, our medium light. I got 2 rinse cups right here. One's going to be, for as I'm tattooing, and one's going to be to rinse it off after so I can get the white highlights in. And there it is, pretty simple, black and gray. We're going to put the stencil on his leg now. So I got this bottle right here. It's got about this much green soap in it, and the rest is water. I'm just going to get the area a little wet. Take that down. Get it nice and clean. There it is. So I always immediately after I shave the skin, before I put the stencil on, I always get some hand sanitizer and wipe the area down just to make sure it's clean. Kill any kind of bacteria or anything that's going to be on the skin. Even though I use green soap, I just feel like this cleans the skin a little bit more and just better off not getting infections or anything like that. So I use stencil stuff, and so far since I've been using it, my stencils have lasted a lot longer. Some people make their own. It's just easier to buy the bottle and use it. I haven't had any problems with it yet, so that's what I use. Just put a really thin layer around it. I'm placing the stencil on him standing up because most people are going to see it with him standing up. So skin changes as people lay down or sit or things like that. So that's what we're going to do. Since this is a big stencil, I'm going to go ahead and cut some fold lines in here. I'm just going to go through and cut in about 2 inches all the way around it. And that's going to help the paper fold around different, creases of the body. And that dried up pretty quick. Let's throw a little bit more on there. I always put the middle down first, and then I just kind of turn the edges in. That way you get a nice flat stencil. If you want it to really stick on the skin, you can always take a wet paper towel and kind of just go right over it. And you can see how it just gives it a little bit more. Any parts that weren't touching now before are definitely touching on the skin now. So I know earlier when we were making the stencil up, and it took about 20 minutes, half hour. It's kind of like, well, you're wasting some time, but I think ultimately you're only as good as what you're following on the skin, unless you're doing like some freehand stuff. But for like photorealism, I think that's a lot more legible and easier to follow than just a bunch of lines and dotted half lines or circles or whatever kind of style that you use. So that's our stencil. We're going to give it about 10 minutes to dry, and then we're going to get on it, start tattooing, go over some things. So I let the stencil dry for a couple minutes, and my friend Tommy's decided, he's going to go all the way up with his sock, full tattoos all the way up to the hip. So instead of just doing a piece, and I could leave it open and he could tie it in, but I figured I'd give it some flow for this piece. So the natural flow of the leg's going to go up like this. I'm going to come through and I'm just going to kind of just freehand a little bit of flow going off just to give it a little bit of direction. And as I'm tattooing, I'll explain to you more about how this is going to look, and you actually see how it looks. Hair's going to come down like this. Those are going to be our flow lines. And I think right there, just alone, just off a couple little lines right there, it already looks like it fits the area better. And of course, I'm going to explain a lot more as I'm shading and stuff like that. I even bought this little pen so I could show you guys. But there it is. All right, let's start this tattoo. I'm right-handed, so I always start from right to left when I'm tattooing, especially when I'm doing realistic pieces. I'm getting through with my 15 mag, and I'm going to start hitting with some dark grays, building off my negative space behind the hair, keeping that flow line negative so we can build some contrast with some darks to lights. I'm pretty lucky that my client has a really, really fair-skinned leg, so we're gonna get some really, really nice contrast today. A lot of darks, a lot of lights, a lot of whites. And we're just going to go step by step and explain everything to you. Right now I'm building up my negative areas, trying to separate the area between the hair and the negative space behind it, a little bit of cast shadow behind it. The majority of the time when I'm doing realistic tattoos, I add some kind of background image to it, whether it be just a back shadow, or sometimes I do like some designs or whatever I feel the piece needs. This one, we have a lot of stuff going on with the image. We got We got a little skull. We got a girl's face. We got some flow lines going through it. We got a skeleton hand. I think that we'll keep the background simple and dark, and it would just give it a little extra for the piece. It won't look so stickerish if we just did this piece and didn't do anything, any kind of cash out behind it or anything. So I started with that, and now we're going to go ahead and start magging in some of the hair with a 15 mag. I'm coming in here with a solid black, being that this is a dark area of the tattoo. I'm going to get in there with my darks first, and then start working my grays off from there. I'd say 90% of the time when I'm doing tattoos and I'm pushing blacks in, I'm using the 15 mag. I mean, of course, if it's a small area, then I might have like a round shader, or I might be using my 9 mag, but if I really want to get some solid black in, and the area is big enough where I can get in there with the 15, it is definitely the choice of the needle that I use. It gets in there first or second pass. I don't feel like it damages the skin as much as like a 7 or a smaller mag. So this is usually what I use. I'm switching over to the 11 now, and I'm going to start working my way off from my darks to my lights, just pushing a little bit of soft gray from the edge. I'm keeping that flow as I'm going, just taking it down. I want to keep some movement to this tattoo. Just, as I'm tattooing, I'm keeping the direction of the hair going down, which is important. I really want to keep this tattoo with, a nice flow. I don't want it to look stagnant. I don't want it to look like it's a sticker on the skin. I want it to look like, I want it to look like artwork on the skin. As I'm tattooing, I usually get the tattoo almost finished as I'm going through. I don't like to jump around. It's not helpful for my client. I know it hurts. I've been tattooed many times, and I know that it sucks when your artists are jumping back and forth. So I do my best to try to get the tattoo finished, or at least to 90%, and at the end, right before the white, I'll come through. I'll run a little bit of line work on areas that need to be tightened up, or if I need to have a little more shading or something. But for the most part, I follow my reference, and I try to get it done, and then move on to the next piece, just from right to left. Half the tattoo, when we're halfway done, half of it will be done, and half of it will be a stencil, which is why I spend so much time on my stencil, because it is my guidelines, and I can look at the reference, of course, and draw on the skin. But especially if you're doing something that needs to be perfect, a portrait or something realistic like this, then you definitely need to be on top of your game. So I'm jumping up here with the 15 on top of the hair, just magging in some blacks, getting in there. I'm getting in there with the blacks first instead of the soft grays, because I want them to be nice and solid, true all the way through. And you see that first pass, and it's already in there. Notice I dipped straight from the solid black into the rinse cup. I know I have my washes laid out, but a lot of times I will dip in there. I'm pretty familiar with my gray wash, so I can't really go into detail like how long you would leave it in the rinse cup, or what kind of tone it would go into. But this is something that you really need to learn as you're tattooing. I can sit here and tell you 1,000 different little tips, and I will, but ultimately, you need to be one with your machine. You need to understand the inks that you're using, the way that, if you mix this one with that one, it's just like, if you're doing color, if you're layering, it's important for you to spend some time and, and do simple little tattoos, and understand what this will do if you do this and that. So that way, when you do come upon a tattoo like this, which, it's pretty trying, and, if you make a couple of mistakes, it's pretty much a free tattoo for your client. So notice as I'm dipping into the black, I'm also getting a little bit of A&D, wiping it on the skin. And I do that for several reasons. One, it's less messy. The skin, the ink's not going to run around the skin so much, which, won't run into different parts of the stencil that you haven't tattooed on yet. And, it also keeps your needle lubed as it's going in and out of the tube. You don't want to, less friction the better, So I always tattoo with the E&D ointment on the skin. So I got my 9 mag, and I'm going through the, just brushing in some hair, getting some direction as far as where the blacks go. I usually will get in the center, and I'll start pushing in some solid black, and then I'll just kind of feather off the edges with whatever direction, if I'm doing hair, that the hair strands are going. As you can see, it's nice and solid black right there next to the eye, but on top and on the bottom, you already have a couple strands coming off, and then as you continue and you do the dark parts on the around it, and then you tie in those hair strands. I really feel like you get a nice product when you're done if you try it this way. I pushed that black up top already, and now I'm coming through with a nice medium wash, and I'm kind of just fanning it off, giving it a nice blend right there. And I'll come through with that middle part where I was just talking about, and I'm just lightening off right there too, and we'll get those strands going really nicely. And it's funny because I talk to a lot of tattoo artists, and there's a lot of things that I would say 80% or more of people are scared to do, and one thing I constantly hear is, oh, I hate doing hair, or I hate doing hands, and I really feel like it's significant what the image is really. I mean, of course, as I'm tattooing, I'm thinking, okay, this is hair. I want to keep the flow going. I know exactly like what I need to do as far as where the blacks need to go, and come off with some light grays, but ultimately, when you're looking at an image, keep in mind what it is, but you need to look at the reference, and sometimes you need to unfocus your eyes and look and say, this isn't a strand of hair right here. This is just a soft gray tone that's going through with this direction that meets up to a nice black tone over here that follows the same direction. You need to think outside the bun sometimes also, and just, yeah, it is hair, but it's just different tones of black and gray that meet up and follow a certain curve. And that's important. Especially, if you're going to attempt realism and stuff like this. Like, you definitely need to be able to, keep that flow going through and create whatever, the image is. So I'm going to go over a couple little techniques as far as how I move my hand with the machine. We got a couple hours right here, so I'm going to be jumping back and forth from a couple little theories that I have to what I'm doing on the tattoo. That way I don't want to sound, just some boring dude like, oh, here I am, doing some hair, and there's some soft black and there's some soft, so here we go. When I'm doing a solid black piece, I'm not moving my hand as fast. I'm spending a little bit more time in the skin. I'm doing, tiny little ovals or circles or whatever, however much room I have for the piece of the image that I'm working on. And when I'm coming through with my soft grays, I'm really not putting much pressure on the skin. I'm just kind of brushing over and spending the least amount of time as I can, or as it needs to be. So, as I'm tattooing, notice when I'm doing blacks, I will slow my hand down, and I will try to get the first or second pass. And when I'm doing grays, I don't try to get it in the first or second pass. I try to build it up. Which is like, I'd rather go softer and build up to the shade that I need than to get in there and make a couple mistakes, and now I have an area that's way too dark, and I have to compensate by making the whole piece darker when I don't want to. So just keep in mind as you're watching, there's gonna be, I know the video sped up because we got to make a certain time limit and stuff, but keep in mind, as I'm moving my hand, the dark areas, I spend a little bit more time in on the first or second pass so that they're in there, and the grays, I spend a little more time making passes so that I can get the tone or the shade that I'm looking for. All right, so we're using the 15 here, and we're filling up some some solid black behind the cheek, trying to, separate the depth. Of course, the hair behind the head is going to be darker than the face because it's farther from your eye. So just building that black in right there, and then I'm going to come through and I'm going to start gray washing around it. But, being that the hair is relatively dark, if I cover up the reference and look at the hair, I'd say 80% of it is black, or, a dark tone. So I'm going to go ahead and get in there with my blacks first and build off into my dark grays. If I was doing a light gray piece, then I'd probably get in there with my soft grays first and then build my way up to my blacks, which I'm going to be jumping back and forth through this whole tattoo, and you're gonna see it. When it needs to be dark, I get in there with my darks first and build my way off, and when it needs to be light, I get in there with my lights first, and then I start building up my darks right there. See, so I'm covering up the back, the back of the reference, just so I can concentrate on the area that I'm working instead of looking at the whole piece. And I do that a lot, as I'm tattooing. I keep in mind the whole image, and I'm bouncing back and forth in my head. But when I'm looking, at certain areas and I need to focus, sometimes I will cover up and look. That way I don't see the whole piece. I just see what I'm working on, and it's helpful. You should try it. This part right here is where the hair is actually going to go into the flow line, and the flow lines are going to be kept, skin tone. So I'm coming through with the dark wash, and I'm just brushing it in to keep that line, make sure I don't go within that line. And I know that this is, my creation of this piece, so I drew these lines in myself, and it's kind of hard for you to imagine it because it's in my head. But this is part of being a tattoo artist. I think, if you want to be a flash artist and do things off the wall and, just other people's artwork, then awesome. I'm not, we need people like that too. But if you want to be an original tattoo artist and you want to do things that people can love and say that, nobody else in the world has that, then, sometimes you're looking at a piece and they want this, and you need to have an open mind and think, well, this piece would be so much better if I did this or if I did that. And, hopefully you'll have a client that trusts you and you could do it, and they'll love it at the end because you incorporated your own style into the tattoo. And I think that's really important if you really want to make a name, or if you want, to do something that people will remember forever, especially, nowadays with so many good tattoo artists in the industry. You definitely need to do stuff to stand out, or you definitely will not stand out. Let's focus on the tattoo a little bit more right now. We can go into some talking later on. Right now I'm using my 15, and I'm just kind of gray washing all the areas around the negative space for that flow line. I mean, if you look at the reference, there's a lot of darks and there's a lot of grays, and so I'll come through with my darks and I'll hit all the hair strands that I need to, and then I'll just kind of gray wash over the areas that need to be done, and then kind of build up my depth from there. And as you can see, we're already starting to get some depth, just from the face to the hair, and then even behind the hair, to show those couple little strands that aren't completely like white or anything, but they're definitely a lighter tone than the blacks that we're pushing in right now. A lot of times I use my mag like a liner. I'll turn on its side and I'll use the 2 needles that I can, whether it be a 11 mag or even a 45 mag. You turn the mag on the side and you have 2 needles right there, and you can definitely tighten up some areas. I do that a lot. I'm using a 25 bag right now. It's my my soft heating gray wash machine, and it's my big grouping for the day. I've used bigger mags and smaller mags and whatever, but I like to use a 25 or bigger for my gray wash for my portraits. I feel like it's a wider grouping of needles. It hits a wider area of the skin at the same time, so I get a little more smoother, consistent gray. I don't know how light I'm going to go with the background on this, but I know that I definitely don't want a really sharp blend into this negative space. So I'm going to come through with my light grays, and then I'm going to start building up my darks from the back of the hand off into the space, and it's just going to, give it a little bit more depth for the piece. I continuously say that, but for this piece to look right, it's all about high contrast and depth, and keeping certain areas blurred out and keeping certain areas sharp so your eyes are drawn to the main image. I mean, if I sat here and spent a whole bunch of time, on the hair and on the background and made it really, really sharp, your eyes are going to be all over the place. But if I keep it fuzzy in the background and really loose, and then I come in and I just make it really, really tight for the face and the hand, then you're definitely going to be drawn towards that. And that's the goal of this tattoo.